Pocket listings are banned. They're dead. They're long gone. Now, what surprises me is that some agents still try to do pocket listings, or they haven't grasped the fact that it's over. The pocket listing era has come to an end. It actually came to an end back in 2020 when NAR killed pocket listings using their clear cooperation policy. So let me back up and explain my understanding of the pocket listing just to make sure we're on the same page. In the past, an agent could take a listing and then they would maybe market that listing to an internal database of buyers or their own list of buyers or some sort of closed network of potential buyers and market that listing for a period of time prior to going public on the MLS. Well, this creates a problem because when you have a pocket listing that has limited exposure, then two things are happening. Number one, the seller is not getting full exposure. And the idea is that the more buyers, the more exposure that that seller's listing is exposed to, the more likely they're going to get a higher or better offer. The other problem is that it cheats agents, other buyers' agents that might be working diligently with a buyer and scouring through public data on the MLS and trying to legitimately find a listing that matches their buyer's needs. So to eliminate this, CAR developed the Clear Cooperation Policy in conjunction with MLSs. And what that means is that, and again, this is back in 2020, that's the crazy part, and I'm still seeing violations 2 years later. But in 2020, they implemented this policy that says if you take a listing, before you as an agent can market that listing to anyone, and I'll get to their definition in a second, but any publicly facing marketing, that listing must be entered into the MLS. And the idea behind that is that with the MLS, it'll distribute that information to all the buyer's agents that are looking and all the consumer sites like Zillow and Realtor.com and all the countless other websites that get that syndicated data from the MLS. So let me tell you what the exact Clear Cooperation Policy is. Within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants, so share it with other buyer's agents. And then it goes on to define public marketing, and it says it includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in the windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays like data feeds, like an IDX feed, for example, digital communications marketing like an email blast, or multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, and other applications available to the general public. So this is basically saying you cannot do any public marketing, and that includes a for sale sign in the front yard or a flyer box. You can do none of this unless you have your listing in the MLS so that it's then in the public domain, for access, meaning. And it says 1 business day of marketing the property. So there are 2 numbers you need to know about. Number 1 is if you begin marketing, let's say like your for sale sign goes in the ground, then within 1 business day, you need to have your listing inputted into the MLS. If you just take a listing, then you have 2 business days, meaning you take the listing you have a signed listing agreement, but you don't do any marketing, no sign in the ground, no flyers, no mention of it to your buyer list or anything like that. You have 2 business days to enter that listing in the MLS. Now, this is it. This is an absolute when it comes to taking a listing. And people ask about exemptions and exclusions. I'll talk about that in a second. But this effectively eliminates 99.9% of any potential for pocket listings. Now, to this day, and this is July of 2022, there's still a Facebook group. I've never been on it, but I know that there's a local one in Southern California called something about pockets or my pocket listings or something that has to do with pocket listings. That at this point, I think, is nothing more than a place for compliance officers to find agents that are in violation, because there's nothing an agent can do that permits them to enter a listing on that Facebook group for pocket listings or even market a listing anywhere without first being on the MLS. You cannot do that. And there's a hefty fine for it. So I'll mention now, if you get caught doing any sort of public marketing of a listing that's not inputted in the MLS, then you get a fine, and it's a hefty one. So the fine is 1% of the list price or $500, whichever is greater. Now, automatically you think 1%, and homes could easily be 800,000, a million, or much higher. That's $10,000 potentially or more. Well, there's a cap. And that cap is $2,500. So in context, the fine that's going to be levied by the MLS is going to be $500 or 1% of the list price, whichever is more. And there's a cap of $2,500 because this fine would very easily result in something that would be thousands of dollars, maybe well over $10,000. So there is a cap of $2,500, but who wants to pay a $2,500 fine? I mean, even a $500 fine, this is an outrageous number. And the idea is that this is the death sentence for pocket listings, because all roads lead back to the obligation of you as the agent putting all of your listings, all of your deals into the MLS. And if you don't, you're subjecting yourself to a very large fine levied by the MLS. Now, I should mention there's something called off-market opportunities or off-market listings. I don't like the term off-market listing because there's really no such thing. If you take a listing, the property is not off the market. And if it's just a verbal listing, then it's meaningless. And you can't really operate on verbal listings anyways. That aside, there are off-market opportunities. And even though I think this is silly, I mean, I would define this as a property owner that's told an agent, hey, if you bring a buyer that's willing to pay X for my property, I'll sell it. And again, these are just kind of verbal commitments. So there are no terms that are written. But the property owner will say, I'll sell it for this price if you find a buyer that's willing to pay, and you can be the agent. Well, even then, that's technically no different than every other property that's not for sale right now, because everyone has their number, right? I mean, virtually all properties would be sold if a buyer knocked on the door and offered a high enough number. So every home is a potential sale. Every home is an off-market opportunity. Just because a property owner told you that they'd be willing to entertain it, okay, fine, that's a little bit of a lead, but quite frankly, its net value is worthless. So I see agents that might go out and market this. Now, here's the thing, an agent cannot market a property just because a property owner has shown interest. An agent can't go market that unique property. They can't say, hey, I talked to the owner of 123 Maple Street. Here it is. Here's everything you need to know. I even had a photographer take pictures. At that point, the agent is engaging in the duties of a licensed agent. They're now marketing on behalf of someone else, and they're marketing places that require written authorization. That written authorization is a listing agreement, effectively. And so the question is, has this agent gone rogue and is doing this without written authorization? If so, they can't publicly market it anyway. And if they get written authorization, then they're right back into the same boat as the requirement to upload to the MLS. So there's truly no way to market any listing, even off-market listings, without putting it in the MLS. So I've researched this topic fairly extensively. I've come to the conclusion that this is fairly ironclad in terms of eliminating pocket listings. Now, of course, there's going to be illicit activity where agents might do something that technically is a pocket listing. And in theory, it's possible, but highly unlikely that they're not going to get caught, because given that all other agents have their hands tied for pocket listings, if they see someone that's doing a pocket listing, they're going to report that person. So that's why I say pocket listings have been eliminated. They're dead, they're extinct, and they're very clearly banned. If you have questions, please leave a comment, and thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful.